Hello again, and welcome back to the Programming and Coding Basics with VBA, Python, and Java with JavaScript, brought to you by QuadRoot R&D. Now we've covered all the concepts that you need to know to get started with coding, but we'll end this part of concepts and application with some application by walking through the code through the example of the game Mastermind in Python. Now, this game uses most of what we've learned. It uses the loops, branches, input and output statements, obviously, arrays, functions, and a couple of things that we've not seen yet, but we will go through them. So we will start with the algorithm and chart it out line by line, and then go through the code in relation to the algorithm steps. And we'll finally end with the demo of the game. So for those who don't know what the Mastermind game is, it's basically a guessing game where the computer guesses a code and you have to break that code. So in this example, we'll limit it to say 4-letter code. It's an alphabetical code, say A, B, C, D, and then you have to guess it. And if you guess it right, that's the end of the game. If it's wrong, then it will ask you to guess again. So it's simple, but the complexity arises when the code is longer. Now a letter can be repeated, and that increases the complexity. And so the computer will give you a hint whether you're closer or not. So you're not guessing blind. So the hint is if you guess a letter right and in the right position, it will output a 1. If you've guessed a letter correctly but it's not in the right position, then it will give you an output 0. Else it will put a dash. So we will start out by charting the algorithm steps. So the first step would be to print the welcome statements. Welcome to Mastermind, and give the user some instructions. You will be required to guess a code. For each guess, you will receive a hint. If you've guessed the letter correctly and in the right position, you will get 1. If you guessed the letter correctly but in the wrong position, you will get a 0. If the letter is incorrect, you'll get a dash. Then you request the complexity, the number of letters that you want to include in your code. Then you request for inputs for the code length. Now these are two different things. For example, let's take a code of length of 4 letters, but you could have repeating letters, so you could have 2 letters repeating multiple times. So you could have a code like ABAB. So based on the inputs provided by the user, we will decide which letters to use, starting from the A. Then it's time for the computer to decide the code. Now obviously we would use some sort of random function here. Then we will have to do the check. And since we're going to do this check many times, we might as well use a loop. And while it's wrong, we will request for inputs of a guess. And if the guess is correct, we will print correct, and then we'll end the program. But if the guess is wrong, as we expect it to go wrong the first time, then we'll give it the hint, and we'll write a separate function for that. And then we'll print the guess along with the hint, and we'll go back to the loop. Well, guess is wrong. You request for inputs, and if the guess is correct, then you go print the correct and you end. Else, repeat the whole thing again, as long as the condition is wrong. But if it's right, you stop. So now let's start writing the code. Now little did I realize the hint function is not as simple, and this was the most complex bit of the code, and we shall see that. So in Python, we write the functions on the top. So I'm going to leave a space for that. But we'll start with importing the random library because, as I said, when we decide the code to guess, we will use the random function. And I'll leave some space for the hint function a bit later. Now in Python, the functions come on top. In VBA, they can come anywhere, on top or on the bottom. In Java, same, preferably at the bottom. The first statements are the welcome statement. So you say, welcome to Mastermind. Now you have to give some instructions. You need to guess a random code. For each guess, you will receive a hint, where 1 means a correct letter and position, 0 means a correct letter but different position. And so the next thing is you request for the number of letters. So you ask the user and you put the input into a variable called num letters. So this will be the number of letters. And we'll prompt the user with the input statement. Select a number of possible letters for this code. And it can be anywhere from 2 to 26. Now 26 being most complex and 2 being the easiest. So 26 using all letters of the alphabet and 2 using at least 2 letters. If it was 1, then it would be very easy. It would just be A, depending on the number of letters of the code. So it has to have at least 2. And we make sure we integer that in Python because Python's a bit anal about that. Then the next input is ask the user for the code length. So we put the variable name as code length and prompt the user select a length for the code. And we'll say at least 4 to 10. And so then we decide which letters to use, and we'll use num letters for doing that since we've asked the user how many letters. If it's 2, then we'll take the first 2. And we'll use that using the left function in Python, and that uses the array methods. So we consider the string A to Z as an array, and we take the left num letters, or rather, if num letters is equal to 2, then we'll take the left 2 of that. So we'll take AB, and this is the way to write the left, to find the left n number of letters. Then we initialize a new variable called code, which is going to be a string, because this is going to be the guess of the computer. And we're going to now decide the code using the random function. And so we know the code length, that was user input. So if it's 4, then for I in range, which is a for loop, I is automatically decided based on the number of letters. So if this is 4, then I begins at 1, so from 1 to 4, or from 0 to 3 rather, if you're talking in terms of index numbers. The code variable is equal to, so say if I is 1, the first iteration, letters, which is AB, if this is 2, and now we use the randint function, 0 to length of letters. So we now know that letters is 2 in this example. So length of AB is 2. 2 minus 1 is 1. So from 0 to 1, randomize something between 0 and 1 and add it to whatever was stored in code. Now code was empty to begin with, so this is ignored in the first instance. So we'll take either 0 and 1, where 0 is A and 1 is B. So letters of 0 is the 0th index, which is A, and letters of 1, where index 1 is B. So 0 is A, 1 is B. So randomize between A and B. And add it to whatever was stored in code, which is nothing now. Say it chose B. Then, for the second iteration, code is equal to, again, randomize between 0 and 1. Say it chose A now. and add it to what was in code, which is B. So it'll be now BA. Then we go for the third iteration, and it's say decided on A. So it's now BAA. And in fact, it's working in the reverse order, so it could have been code plus this. So it's now AAB. And then finally, the fourth iteration, code is equal to, say now it's B. So AAB is stored here, so now B, AAB. And there we've decided the code, but it's still secret. The user doesn't know that. So code is now decided. Let's start the loop. So we initialize guesses as an empty array. Now, guesses is plural, so it's going to have a lot of guesses. And we're going to print this array. So while true, now I've not said while guess is wrong because we haven't had a guess yet. So we'll just assume that the guess is wrong. So we are starting with the true condition, which is where true is guess is wrong. So true means this will always execute. So if this will always execute, then in order to come out of this, we'll have to break. And that is a function which we've not talked about. So the break function will break in this instance. If the guess is equal to the code, we'll break after we print the correct code. So true is now forcing this while to always loop. So we'll need to break. So the first thing is we'll check if the guess is equal to the code. So let's take the first guess, and we'll have to prompt the user. Enter guess with the following letters. And now we know letters is AB in our case. And we'll say with the following letters, add AB. And we'll convert to uppercase. And we'll use the strip. So now strip removes the white spaces at both the ends. So this is a new function we've not talked about. Just in case the user has entered any spaces at the beginning or the end, it'll remove that. And so you've noticed here that there are 4 quote marks because it is concatenating this string, then concatenating what is stored in letters, which is AB, then concatenating this string, which is closing the bracket, which was opened here, and then a colon just for neatness, and a space, and then the user can enter whatever code here. So say the user puts ABBA, ABBA, that gets stored in guess. So then we do the check. So while length of guess does not equal to code length, so this is just a check to make sure that the user has input the right length, we'll ask the user again, incorrect length, enter guess with any of the following letters again. Now we check if guess equals to code, print your guess was correct, and then we break, because if we don't break, it will loop because of the true condition. Else we call the function, but we also print. There are a number of functions here which we will discuss. Now the hint function is called here, hint, and we give it some inputs. What is the code that the computer decided, which is the correct code, and what is the guess that the user input. But what we are doing is we are now filling in the guesses array, and we'll fill in the first guess, which is using the append function. So the append keeps adding it. It's like this, adding whatever to code. Then code is the variable itself, so adding something to itself. That is called append. So we could have said code.append and put this in brackets. This is another way of doing the same thing. So guesses.append, and then we put an empty space .join. Now there's another command which joins or merges elements of an array into a string. So, an array has its elements separated by a comma, but it's not a printable comma. It's in the structure of the array that the computer sees it. But if you want to remove those commas and convert an array into string, use the join. But we'll put a space. So those commas are then replaced by a space. So we join all the guesses, and then we put an arrow as a string, and then we concatenate another space join and the hint, or whatever is returned from the function hint, which would be something like -101. So this is basically printing out the guess, but first we just assemble the array before we print it, or we build the array before we print it. And then that's the function. So we are now waiting for the inputs before we print it, and then we print for iGuess in guesses. Print iGuess. Now the iGuess is an iteration, so starts with 1. If there are 4 guesses, it will print all the 4 guesses. Now let's go in detail through the hint function. So the first statement is obviously the opening of the function, where we accept the inputs and we accept the code as a new variable name called correct. We could have used code, but it's good to have a new variable name within a function. So this variable name would be private to this function. Again, I'm using a word that you've seen before, private versus public. But in Python, since we don't declare the type of variables, so it's more of a Java concept. But this variable correct is private just to this function. But correct will get an input as the code, the correct code. And guess will get the input as guess. So guess is variable in this main program and also variable in this function. So I have put the algorithm as comments in this function, and I've explained each statement. So code is passed into function as correct, guess as guess. Now we initialize an output array. This is going to be what is going to be printed as the guess. So this is going to be the output of the hint function into here. So first we have to think about what goes on in our mind when we are checking a code. Suppose the correct code was ABA and the user input ABCD. So we want to check what's correct first. So we see that AB is correct. Then we want to see what's correct but in the wrong position. And we see that nothing else is correct and in the wrong position. So we put a dash. But, and this is where it gets tricky, in order to see that, first we have to eliminate the AB because we've already dealt with it. So we eliminate it in the code by just replacing that AB with something else completely different, which is a number, because we don't want to confuse ourselves with letters now. So we'll replace that with a number, say. So the original guess ABA becomes, let's say 9. We'll replace the correct letters with 9. So it becomes 99BA. And so we ignore 9 and we just look at now BA. And we replace the first AB from ABCD, which was the guess, with say 8. So your guess now becomes 88CD, and now we ignore 8 and we see if CD is there in the code, which is 99BA, and we continue that way. So for that respect, we've not used the elif because I've considered, let's do it separately. First, let's check for the ones, which is the correct letter and position, and come out of that. Once we've done that, then we'll check for the correct letters but not position, or neither. So when checking for the correct letter and position, we put a loop through each letter where the range is the length of the correct, which is the code, which is in this case 4. So it will run through 4 iterations. If the guess of the first letter is equal to the correct, then we output 1. Pretty straightforward. In the output array, which is ultimately going to be output over here. And then we want to remove the counted letters from the correct with 8 and from the guess with 9. Okay, so we don't replace it with other strings. We'll replace it with a number. So if it was correct, we replace the original correct code with 8. So we use the left bit of the correct code. Then we concatenate 8 to replace the correct letter that was guessed. And then we put the right bit of the correct code. And these are the left functions and the right functions in Python using array methods. Then we do the same for guess, but we replace it with 9 instead. And these are just random numbers I've chosen. Could have been 1 or 2, anything you choose, but not a letter. Okay, so that's done. We've replaced now the counted letters with 8 and 9. Now let's go for the remaining, which is correct letter but wrong position or nothing. So we start again with the loop, and if it's not equal to 9, which is, now we're checking the guess. If guess I is not equal to 9, that means now we'll check for correct letter but different position. Now there's a new command called try and except, which means sometimes when we expect an error, we want to tell the program not to stop but continue with something else. So we use the try command in Python and Java. So it'll try something. If the program finds an error, it will do whatever's under except. But if there was no error, then it will do whatever's under else. So there's the try, except, else. Now what we're going to try is the find command. Now the find command is also known as instring in VBA, and you can also use index, but find is more intuitive, so I've used find. Now the problem is, and this is also the case in VBA and in Java, if it doesn't find, it throws an error. And that's why we need to use the try except command. But if it does find, then we can go to the else bit. If it doesn't find, it goes to the except bit. If it does find, we can go to the else bit. So now we're finding for what is in the guess. So with the first iteration, if we're trying to find it in a different position, since we've already accounted for the correct positions. So if we find, now we're trying to search for C in correct. And if you remember, correct is now equal 88BA, and we're trying to find C, and we can't find it, so it's an error. So it'll go to this. So output array equals to dash. But if it did find it, and we're expecting it to be a non-zero number, but just in case, I've put a condition there. If x is greater than 0, because if it found it, it would find the index of that number. It would give you the index where it found C. which would be a greater than 0. So if x greater than 0, then output array equals to 0, because it found the letter but in a different position. And now we replace that with an 8 to remove uncounted letters. Else, we put a dash. And then we return the output array, but we join it before that without any spaces. So now the output array includes ones, zeros, or dashes. And then that output array gets returned over here and gets joined with spaces to the guesses array, which ultimately gets printed out here. So it'll keep printing out the older guesses as well as the latest guess until you've got it right. So let's see how this works. I've written the program and saved it as a .py file, which is a Python file. And since I've got Python installed, I can run it from command prompt. And I've stored it in my C colon. So I just named the program mastermind.py. And I execute it. And it says, welcome to Mastermind. You need to guess a random code. For each guess, you will receive a hint where 1 means correct letter and position, 0 means a correct letter but different position. Select the number of possible letters for the code. And let's say 4 letters, so A, B, C, D. And select the length of the code. Say we'll keep that also 4. Could be longer, could be 10. But I don't want to be here all day. So enter guess with any of the following letters, A, B, C, D. So it decided which 4 letters, which is the first 4 letters. Okay, so let me guess ABBA, since I like ABBA so much. And it said 0, 1, dash, 1, dash. So I'm guessing A is there, but B is in the correct position, the third B. So let's make it B, A, B, C. And so the second position, so A, B. So you can see now how it concatenated. So the guess, and then put that arrow, and then it put the output array. And so we know now that AB is in the correct position. It's not B, it's not A. So let's try CAB, CAB, and it's not C, so let's try D. Your guess was correct, and that's it. I guessed it within 3 guesses. So that's it, guys. That's the example of the Mastermind game in Python. Hope you understood it. Else, give it a repeat, watch, and I'll see you in the next class where we will go through the hands-on. We will take you through the IDEs, which is the integrated development environment where you write your code and you test your code. And then we will get to the exercise, which is a pseudo AI program called Life Decisions. So I'll see you in the next class and the next part.